They've fought demons before, but never one who came to end the fight forever. He steps through fire that isn't theirs, armor scorched by wars they'll never understand. Gods bleed, emperors kneel, and the tournament means nothing to a man who already killed hell. So what happens when the realm of balance meets a force that only knows extinction? The sky above the Wu Shi Academy tore open at twilight, splitting the heavens with a sound like reality itself screaming in agony. The wound was not a portal in any tradition known to the elder gods or the sorcerers of Outworld. It burned with colors that had no name, argent fire that consumed the air and left behind a smell of scorched ozone and something older, something that tasted of iron and judgment. The monks training in the courtyards froze mid-form, their ancient disciplines momentarily forgotten as they stared upward at the rupture that pulsed like an infected wound in the fabric of existence itself. Lao Jin had been transcribing the events of the most recent Mortal Kombat tournament when the tear opened. His brush hung suspended above the parchment, ink pooling at its tip, as he felt a pressure building in his chest that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with wrongness. This was not the magic of Outworld bleeding through, not the dimensional instability that sometimes followed when realms grew too close during tournament seasons. This was something that rejected the very concept of balance that the tournaments existed to maintain. Through the burning wound in the sky, a figure emerged. He descended not with grace, but with the weight of divine judgment, trailing fire that was not fire, wrapped in armor that seemed forged from the death of gods. The impact when he struck the central courtyard shattered stone that had stood for 3,000 years. Cracks spider-webbed outward in perfect geometric patterns, and every torch in the academy guttered and died, then reignited with flames that burned green and hungry. The figure rose slowly, and Lao Jin felt his hand begin to shake as he tried to capture what he was witnessing. The armor was green, scarred by wars beyond counting, marked with symbols that hurt to look at directly. The helmet concealed any trace of humanity, reflecting only the flames and the sky and the horror of monks scrambling backward. The Doomslayer had arrived in Earthrealm. He stood motionless in the center of the destruction, assessing, calculating. His visor swept across the courtyard with mechanical precision, cataloging threats with inhuman speed. The monks, trained warriors who had faced demons from the Netherrealm and survived, felt something primal override their discipline. This was not a demon, this was not a challenger, this was an ending given shape and purpose. Lao Jin watched as Master Bo Rai Cho, drunk as always, but no fool, raised his hands in a gesture of peace. The old master's voice carried across the courtyard with the authority of decades. "Stranger, you stand in the Wu Shi Academy, sacred ground of Earthrealm. State your purpose or face the consequences of trespass." The Slayer's response was to turn his head slightly, the movement sharp and predatory. Then the demons came. They erupted from the shadows at the courtyard's edge, lesser spawn of the Netherrealm that had been lurking in the cracks between realms, waiting for an opportunity that the tournament's chaos might provide. They were Oni, twisted things with too many limbs and faces that shifted between human and insect. 6 of them, their arrival announced by the stench of sulfur and the sound of chittering laughter. The Slayer moved. Lao Jin's brush could not capture the speed. One moment the armored figure stood in contemplation. The next his fist had already crushed the skull of the nearest Oni, driving it into the stone hard enough that the body cratered before dissolving into ash. The second demon lunged with claws extended, a strike that would have disemboweled a mortal. But the Slayer caught it mid-leap, pivoted, and used the creature's momentum to tear it in half lengthwise. The sound was wet and final. The remaining 4 demons hesitated, their limited intelligence recognizing apex predation when it stared back at them through an emerald visor. The Slayer produced a weapon from nowhere, a double-barreled instrument of apocalypse that gleamed with the same wrongness as the tear in the sky. The first blast removed an Oni from existence, its body flash vaporized into component atoms. The second shot caught 2 demons as they tried to flee, punching through both and leaving holes that smoked with argent residue. The final demon attempted to teleport, its form beginning to blur into shadow, but the Slayer was already moving. He grabbed it by what might have been a throat, lifted it high, and brought it down across his armored knee with enough force that the spine snapped audibly before the creature burst into flames that were not natural fire. Silence reclaimed the courtyard. The Slayer stood among the ashes, his armor splattered with ichor that steamed and evaporated. He made no sound of exertion, no gesture of triumph. He simply reloaded his weapon with practiced efficiency and turned his attention back to the monks, his visor reflecting their horrified faces. Lao Jin's hand moved again, capturing what he could, knowing that history was being written in blood and fire. He wrote the words that would haunt Earthrealm's chronicles for generations to come. The balance has been broken, not by the enemies we knew, but by a force that recognizes no balance at all. Thunder rolled across a clear sky. Lightning struck the courtyard's center with pinpoint precision, and when the light faded, Raiden stood between the Slayer and the monks. The god of Thunder's eyes glowed white with divine authority, his conical hat casting shadows that seemed deeper than they should. He radiated power that had defended Earthrealm for millennia, power that had faced down gods and demons and mad emperors. His voice carried the weight of storms. "I am Raiden, protector of Earthrealm. You have trespassed upon sacred ground and brought violence to those under my protection. Explain yourself, warrior, or face judgment." The Slayer stared at him. Raiden's expression shifted, uncertainty creeping into his divine features. He was accustomed to intimidation working both ways, accustomed to beings recognizing the threat he represented. But this armored figure showed no recognition, no fear, no respect for godhood. The Slayer's hand tightened on his weapon, and Raiden saw in that small movement a promise of escalation that would leave the academy in ruins. "You hunt demons," Raiden said, his tone shifting toward understanding. "The Oni you destroyed were creatures of the Netherrealm, enemies of Earthrealm. Perhaps we are not adversaries. Lower your weapon, and let us speak as warriors rather than—" The Slayer raised his weapon. Raiden's lightning came instantly, a bolt meant to disable rather than kill, calculated to strike armor rather than flesh. It hit the Slayer square in the chest with enough voltage to stop a heart, enough power to shatter stone and boil water. The Slayer absorbed it, his armor flaring with blue-white energy that crackled across his form, then faded. He took one step forward. Raiden's eyes widened. The second lightning strike came faster, more focused, a spear of divine wrath that could have leveled a fortress. The Slayer walked through it, his visor never leaving Raiden's face. Electricity earthed through his boots, scorching the ground with each step, and still he advanced. Raiden teleported backward in a flash of light, reappearing 20 feet away, his mind racing through possibilities that all ended in violence. Liu Kang arrived in a burst of flame, landing beside Raiden with fists already wreathed in fire. The champion of Mortal Kombat, victor of multiple tournaments, assessed the situation with a warrior's instinct. He saw the destroyed demons, saw Raiden's uncharacteristic uncertainty, saw the armored figure advancing with mechanical inevitability. "Together," Liu Kang said simply. They attacked in perfect synchronization, thunder and fire combining in a technique that had destroyed gods. Lightning from above, flame from below, a pincer of elemental fury designed to overwhelm and annihilate. The explosion where they struck the Slayer lit the entire valley, a detonation of power that shattered windows in the monastery and sent shockwaves rippling outward. When the light cleared, the Slayer stood exactly where he had been, his armor scorched but intact. He shot Liu Kang. The blast caught the champion in the shoulder, spinning him around and dropping him to one knee. The wound smoked with argent fire that ate at his flesh, a pain unlike any tournament injury, unlike even the corrupted magic of Outworld. Liu Kang gasped, his own flames flickering as he tried to process what had just happened. No mortal weapon should have penetrated his defenses. No mortal should have survived their combined assault. Raiden moved between them, his hands raised not in attack, but in desperate plea. "Stop. We are not your enemy. The demons you seek are not here. This is Earthrealm, protected by ancient law, and you." The Slayer's fist caught Raiden across the jaw. The god of thunder flew backward, crashing through a stone wall with an impact that shook the foundation. For a moment, absolute silence reigned. Every monk, every warrior, every living thing in the Wuxi Academy processed the impossible. A god had been struck by mortal hands. A protector who had stood for eons had been physically overwhelmed by a being who should not exist in their reality. Lao Jin wrote with shaking hands, "The balance is not broken. It is being rewritten by a force that never agreed to its terms." The Slayer stood in the center of the courtyard, waiting. Raiden emerged from the rubble, his face bruised, his eyes burning with fury that was part divine wrath and part genuine shock. He had not felt physical pain in centuries. The Slayer had not just hurt him, he had reminded him that even gods could bleed. Liu Kang was struggling to his feet, his wound still smoking, his expression a mix of agony and determination. "You are making a grave mistake," Raiden said, his voice carrying harmonics that made reality shiver. "I have been patient, I have sought understanding, but if you will not listen, if you insist on violence, then you will learn why I am called Protector." The Slayer's helmet tilted slightly, a gesture that somehow conveyed mockery. Raiden's hands came together, and the storm answered. The sky above the academy turned black, clouds boiling into existence with supernatural speed. Lightning lanced down in a dozen places at once, a cage of electrical fury that surrounded the Slayer, compressed inward, and detonated with enough force to vaporize steel. The thunder was deafening, a sound that left ears bleeding, and monks crying out in pain. The Slayer emerged from the lightning wreathed in blue fire, his armor glowing white-hot. He charged. Raiden barely teleported in time, reappearing behind the Slayer, but the armored warrior had already anticipated the move. His elbow swung backward with surgical precision, catching Raiden in the ribs hard enough to crack bone. Raiden gasped, teleported again, and again the Slayer was turning, tracking him, predicting him. This was not the first god he had fought. This was not even the 100th. Liu Kang launched himself back into the fray, his signature flying kick wreathed in flames hot enough to melt stone. The Slayer caught his ankle mid-flight, yanked him out of the air, and slammed him into the ground hard enough to crater the courtyard. Before Liu Kang could recover, the Slayer's boot descended toward his chest. Raiden's lightning lance intercepted the stomp, a focused beam that finally drove the Slayer back a step. "Enough," Raiden commanded, his voice resonating with divine authority that compelled obedience from demons and mortals alike. "You will cease this assault, or I will be forced to kill you. I do not wish this, but I will defend Earthrealm with my last breath." The Slayer responded by pulling a different weapon from his arsenal, a plasma rifle that hummed with malevolent energy. The first shot forced Raiden to teleport. The second and third saturated the area where he reappeared, scorching the ground and filling the air with ozone. Liu Kang tried to circle around, but the Slayer's awareness seemed omnidirectional. He fired without looking, the shot grazing Liu Kang's side and sending him sprawling. The battle had lasted less than 5 minutes. Already, the Wuxi Academy looked like a war zone. Raiden and Liu Kang, the mightiest defenders of Earthrealm, were battered and bleeding, fighting not to win but to survive. And the Slayer had not taken a single step backward. His armor was scorched, yes, his systems taxed by the assault of divine energy, but he showed no signs of fatigue, no hesitation, no doubt. Lao Jin watched from the shadows of the library, his chronicle growing darker with each line. He wrote the truth that everyone in the courtyard was beginning to understand. This is not a warrior. This is a force of nature. This is what happens when hell itself learns to fear. A portal opened at the courtyard's edge, a swirling vortex of green flame and shadow that announced Outworld's arrival. Shang Tsung emerged first, his sorcerer's robes immaculate despite the destruction around him, his expression calculating. Behind him came Quan Chi, the necromancer's pale skin gleaming in the firelight, his red eyes assessing the Slayer with interest that bordered on hunger. "How fascinating," Shang Tsung said, his voice smooth as poisoned silk. "Raiden, it appears you have acquired a new problem. How fortunate that we arrived when we did." Raiden turned, his eyes blazing. "You dare enter Earthrealm uninvited? The treaty forbids." The treaty allows for investigation of dimensional anomalies that might threaten the balance between realms. Quan Chi interrupted, gesturing toward the still-burning tear in the sky. That portal constitutes such an anomaly. We are well within our rights to assess the threat. And what a threat he is. The Slayer's visor tracked between the sorcerers and the god, calculating new variables. Shang Tsung smiled, and it was the smile of a predator who had just spotted wounded prey. This warrior clearly does not belong to Earthrealm. His power is considerable. Perhaps he would find a more welcome home in Outworld, where strength is properly appreciated. What say you, Armored One? Would you serve a master who understands your capabilities? The Slayer raised his weapon and fired. The shot would have vaporized Shang Tsung's head, but the sorcerer's reflexes were honed by centuries of treachery. He dissolved into green flame, reappearing beside Quan Chi, his smile gone, replaced by cold fury. How dare you refuse my generosity? Do you know what I am? What power I command? Quan Chi's skeletal hand wove patterns in the air, and the ground beneath the Slayer erupted. Skeletal hands, dozens of them, burst from the earth to grab at his legs, his arms, his body. The necromancer's magic sought to bind and control, to turn the Slayer into just another undead puppet in his army. The spell was ancient and absolute, had bound demons and gods and everything in between. The Slayer tore through the skeletal hands like paper. His armor flared with argent energy that consumed the necromantic magic, burning it away before it could take hold. He grabbed one of the skeletal arms, yanked it free from the earth, and hurled it at Quan Chi like a spear. The necromancer barely deflected it with a barrier of shadow, his expression shifting from confidence to concern. "Impossible," Quan Chi breathed. "That spell has never failed. What manner of being resists the very essence of death?" Shang Tsung's hands erupted with green fire, and he launched a barrage of soul-stealing projectiles at the Slayer, each one designed to rip out life force and leave nothing but a desiccated husk. The Slayer walked through the assault, his armor absorbing impacts that would have killed lesser beings. He closed the distance to Shang Tsung in 3 long strides, grabbed the sorcerer by the throat, and lifted him off the ground. Shang Tsung's eyes went wide, his hands scrabbling at the iron grip that was crushing his windpipe. He tried to transform, to steal the Slayer's form as he had stolen so many others, but the moment his magic made contact with the Slayer's essence, it recoiled. There was nothing to steal, no soul to take, only rage given purpose and form. Quan Chi attacked from behind, spectral blades manifesting in his hands, driving them toward the Slayer's back. The blades shattered on impact, fragments of necromantic energy scattering harmlessly. The Slayer turned, still holding Shang Tsung, and regarded Quan Chi with what might have been contempt. Raiden made his decision. Lightning struck the Slayer from above, not to harm but to blind, to create an opening. In that flash of light, Raiden teleported forward, grabbed both sorcerers, and vanished with them in a burst of electricity. They reappeared at the courtyard's far edge, Shang Tsung gasping and clutching his throat, Quan Chi's expression dark with rage. "You save them?" Liu Kang demanded, pulling himself upright despite his wounds. "Master, they are our enemies. Let the stranger destroy them." "And then what?" Raiden countered, his eyes never leaving the Slayer. "He has shown no discrimination. He attacks gods and demons alike. If we allow him to continue unchecked, Earthrealm will burn alongside Outworld. We need to understand what he is and why he is here." The Slayer began walking toward them again, his pace steady and inexorable. "Understanding can wait," Liu Kang said, fire reigniting around his fists. "Survival comes first." But Lao Jin, watching from his window, knew that neither understanding nor survival was guaranteed. He wrote with hands steadier now, accepting the truth of what he witnessed. The tournament is meaningless, the balance is meaningless. He comes from a place where all that matters is the war, and the war never ends. The Slayer stopped his advance as more portals opened around the courtyard. This time, they were not the controlled gates of Outworld sorcery, but ragged tears that matched the wound in the sky. From them emerged demons that made the Oni look like children's toys. These were Hell Knights, their bodies massive and armored in bone and horn, eyes burning with hellfire, their very presence causing the temperature to spike. 6 of them materialized, shaking the ground with each step, their roars carrying frequencies that shattered glass and brought monks to their knees. The Slayer's posture changed instantly, his weapon coming up with something that might have been eagerness. The first Hell Knight charged with speed that belied its mass, closing the distance in a heartbeat. The Slayer sidestepped, let the creature's momentum carry it past, and drove his fist into its spine with enough force to snap bone. The Hell Knight roared in pain but didn't fall. It spun, massive claws swinging in arcs that would have bisected a building. The Slayer ducked under the first swipe, blocked the second with his armored forearm, and brought his weapon up to fire point blank into the creature's jaw. The explosion removed the top of the Hell Knight's skull, its body crashing backward in a spray of gore. The remaining 5 attacked as a coordinated pack, surrounding the Slayer, cutting off escape routes. Their claws came from all angles, a web of death that would shred anything caught within. The Slayer activated something on his suit, and suddenly he was moving faster than physics should allow, a blur of green armor and muzzle flash. He fired as he moved, each shot precisely calculated, targeting joints and weak points with surgical precision. One Hell Knight went down with its knee blown apart, another with half its skull missing, but they adapted. The remaining 3 Hell Knights began using the environment, throwing rubble, creating barriers of flame, trying to box the Slayer into a kill zone. One succeeded, its massive hands coming together with the Slayer caught between them. The clap of impact echoed across the valley, a sound like a mountain falling. The Hell Knight raised its hands to reveal its prize. The Slayer stood in its palm, unharmed, and drove his weapon upward through the creature's wrist. The shot traveled through bone and muscle, emerged from the Hell Knight's elbow, and continued into its chest. The creature staggered, its grip loosening, and the Slayer dropped free. Before he hit the ground, he'd fired twice more, each shot punching through armor that should have been impenetrable. The 4th Hell Knight fell. The 5th and 6th attacked together, one high and one low, a pincer meant to crush. The Slayer met them head-on, blocking the low creature's charge with his entire body, boots digging furrows in stone as he slid backward from the impact. At the same time, he raised his weapon and fired upward, catching the aerial attacker mid-leap. The shot transformed its chest into a crater, momentum carrying the corpse over the Slayer's head to crash behind him. The final Hell Knight, seeing 5 of its kind destroyed in less than 2 minutes, did what demons rarely do. It hesitated. The Slayer showed no mercy for doubt. He closed the distance, discarded his firearm, and engaged the creature hand to hand. The fight that followed was brutal and intimate. Claws against armor, fists against bone, 2 killers locked in a dance as old as violence itself. The Hell Knight was stronger, its muscles capable of crushing stone, but the Slayer was faster, more precise, and infinitely more experienced. Each of the demon's strikes met empty air or armored plating. Each of the Slayer's strikes found vulnerabilities that hadn't existed moments before. The end came when the Slayer grabbed the Hell Knight's horn, yanked its head down, and drove his other hand into the creature's eye socket. There was a wet crunch, a brief moment where the demon seemed to understand its mortality, and then the Slayer pushed deeper, his arm disappearing to the elbow. When he withdrew, the Hell Knight's body convulsed once and collapsed. The Slayer stood among 6 corpses, his armor drenched in demon blood that steamed and evaporated, leaving behind only the scent of sulfur and judgment. He turned back to face the assembly of Earthrealm's defenders and Outworld's sorcerers, and everyone present understood that they had just witnessed a demonstration. This was not the Slayer's full power. This was a warning. Shang Tsung recovered his composure first, his throat bruised but his mind racing with possibilities. Remarkable. Absolutely remarkable. Those were Hell Knights, ancient demons from the Netherrealm's deepest pits. I have seen entire armies fall to a single such creature. He destroyed 6 in less time than it takes to brew tea. His eyes gleamed with something approaching avarice. Quan Chi, imagine having such a warrior under our control, with proper binding spells. There is no binding him. Quan Chi interrupted, his voice carrying certainty born of failed experience. I felt it when my magic touched him. He is not simply resistant to necromancy, he is anathema to it. My power broke against him like waves against a mountain. Whatever he is, he exists outside the cycle of life and death that I manipulate. Then we kill him, Shang Tsung said simply. Surely even he can be overwhelmed with sufficient force. Raiden stepped forward, his divine presence reasserting itself despite his injuries. You will do no such thing, not in Earthrealm. This warrior, whoever he is, has violated the sanctity of the Wuxi Academy and assaulted its protector. His judgment is mine to render. Your judgment seems to have left you flat on your back, Shang Tsung observed with a smirk. Perhaps you should consider that your authority does not extend to beings from beyond the realms we know. Before Raiden could respond, another portal opened, this one announced by trumpet blasts that carried harmonics of divine perfection. The portal was golden, its edges sharp and geometric, and through it stepped a figure that made even the assembled warriors pause in recognition. Fujin, god of wind and Raiden's brother, arrived with his hair streaming in winds that existed independently of the physical world. Brother, Fujin called, his voice carrying urgency. The elder gods have sensed the disturbance. They demand answers. What is this being that tears holes in reality and leaves dimensional echoes across multiple realms? Raiden's expression grew darker. I was hoping to provide those answers before involving the elder gods. This situation is delicate. Delicate? Fujin's eyes swept across the destroyed courtyard, the corpses of demons, the wounded Liu Kang, the scorched earth where divine lightning had failed to stop a single warrior. This is an apocalypse in progress, brother. The balance between realms is threatened. The elder gods will not ignore this. The Slayer watched the exchange with his head tilted slightly, as if cataloging another variable in an equation he was solving. Then he began walking toward Fujin, his pace steady and purposeful. Fujin's hands came up, and the winds answered his call. Cyclones forming from nothing, walls of air pressure that could flay flesh from bone. The Slayer walked through them. Fujin's eyes widened in disbelief. His winds were divine force made manifest, capable of redirecting meteors and stopping invasions. They bent around the Slayer like water around stone, unable to find purchase, unable to slow his advance. Fujin intensified his assault, calling upon storms that had been sleeping since the dawn of creation, but the Slayer simply leaned forward slightly, as if walking against a stiff breeze. Impossible, Fujin breathed. Even Raiden cannot ignore my winds like this. What manner of... The Slayer reached him and stopped, standing close enough that Fujin could see his reflection in that green visor. For a long moment, nothing happened. The wind died. The assembled warriors held their breath. Then the Slayer reached out, slowly, deliberately, and placed his hand on Fujin's chest. Fujin felt something then, something that made his divine essence recoil in horror. It was not a threat of violence, though that was certainly present. It was recognition. The Slayer's touch carried the weight of eons, of battles fought across dimensions beyond counting, of gods that had tried to stand in his way and discovered that divinity offered no protection from judgment. Fujin understood in that moment what Raiden had already learned. They were not dealing with a warrior or a demon or even a rogue god. They were dealing with something that had been forged specifically to end things like them. The Slayer withdrew his hand and turned away, leaving Fujin standing motionless, processing a truth that shook the foundations of his being. He walked back toward the center of the courtyard, positioning himself equidistant from all assembled parties, and waited. The message was clear. He had assessed them all and found them equally irrelevant to his purpose. "We must contain him," Liu Kang said, clutching his shoulder where the argent wound still smoked. "Master Raiden, if the Elder Gods are involved, perhaps they can. The Elder Gods will want him destroyed or bound," Raiden interrupted. "They see threats to the balance as cancers to be excised. But I have fought this warrior, felt his power. Destruction may not be possible, and binding." He glanced at Quan Chi. "You heard the necromancer. His magic, which has enslaved gods, cannot touch this being. Then we appeal to reason. Fujin suggested, finding his voice again. He has shown tactical awareness, restraint even. He could have killed us all multiple times but chose not to. Perhaps he can be reasoned with, made to understand that we are not his enemies. Shang Tsung laughed, the sound bitter. He crushed my throat for offering alliance. He destroys demons on sight and attacks gods with equal enthusiasm. What makes you think he distinguishes between friend and enemy at all? Because he is still standing here, Raiden observed quietly. If he simply wanted destruction, he would have continued his rampage. Instead, he waits. He is listening, even if he does not speak. There is intelligence behind that visor, purpose beyond simple violence. Lao Jin, forgotten in the shadows, wrote furiously. His chronicle was becoming something more than simple history. It was becoming a theological text, a record of the moment when the old certainties died and a new terror was born. He wrote, "The gods debate while the executioner waits." They do not understand that the question is not whether they can stop him, but whether they should. For if demons and gods exist in the same space to him, then what judgment does that render on the realms themselves? A new sound split the air, a horn that carried notes of brass and bone, announcing arrival from the Netherrealm. The portal that opened was not a gateway but a wound, a tear in reality that bled shadow and fire. Scorpion emerged first, the resurrected spectre wreathed in hellfire, his kunai already in hand. Behind him came Sub-Zero of the Lin Kuei, ice forming in the air around him, his eyes cold with warrior's focus. And behind them, imposing and terrible, came Shao Kahn. The Emperor of Outworld ducked through the portal, his massive frame armored in bone and steel, his helmet skull-like and crowned with horns. He carried his wrath hammer with casual ease, a weapon that had crushed realms, and his presence seemed to darken the very air. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of millennia of conquest. So this is the insect that has caused such disturbance. How disappointing. Raiden moved to intercept, but Shao Kahn waved him off dismissively. "Peace, Raiden. I am here as an observer, nothing more. The Elder Gods have extended me temporary passage to assess this threat to Outworld. If this creature intends to disrupt the tournament, I will crush him personally." His eyes, burning with malevolent intelligence, fixed on the Slayer. "Look at me, worm. I am Shao Kahn, Emperor of Outworld, conqueror of 1,000 realms. Kneel before my presence, or I will teach you the meaning of submission." The Slayer stared back, his posture unchanged. Shao Kahn's expression darkened. He took one massive step forward, the ground cratering beneath his weight. "You dare ignore an emperor? I have destroyed beings who claimed godhood. I have made the elder gods themselves hesitate. You are nothing before my power." He raised his hammer, energy crackling along its length, a weapon infused with the stolen strength of conquered realms. "This is your final warning. Kneel or die." The Slayer reached to his back and withdrew a weapon that made every warrior present take an instinctive step backward. It was enormous, a blade the size of a man, burning with the same argent fire as the tear in the sky. The crucible had been drawn, the air around it shimmered with heat that was not heat, energy that existed to unmake rather than create. Shao Kahn laughed, a sound like stones grinding together. "A sword? You think a blade will?" The Slayer moved, and the distance between them disappeared. The crucible swung in an arc that left after-images burned into the retinas of everyone watching. Shao Kahn brought his hammer up to block, confident in the weapon that had shattered mountains. The crucible cut through the wrath hammer like it was made of paper. The blade continued its arc, trailing sparks of argent fire, and only Shao Kahn's centuries of combat experience saved him. He threw himself backward, his armor scraping across stone as the crucible passed through the space where his chest had been. The Emperor scrambled to his feet, staring in disbelief at his shattered weapon, at the pieces of his most prized possession lying in smoking ruin. "Impossible," Shao Kahn breathed. "That hammer was forged in the souls of gods. It has broken Elder God artifacts. Nothing can destroy it. Nothing." The Slayer advanced, the crucible held low and ready. Shao Kahn's shock transformed into rage. The fury of an emperor, confronted with something beyond his power to control or comprehend. He roared, a sound that shook the foundations of the academy, and green soul energy exploded outward from his body. This was the power that had conquered realms, the stolen essence of millions, manifesting as raw destructive force. The blast carved through stone, vaporized matter, and left nothing but scorched earth in its wake. When the energy cleared, the Slayer stood in a circle of intact ground, his armor glowing with absorbed power. He had not moved. Shao Kahn stared, and for the first time in millennia, genuine fear crossed his features. This was not a warrior. This was not even a rival. This was judgment made flesh, and he recognized it because he had been that judgment for countless others. Now he was on the receiving end, and the realization paralyzed him. The Slayer raised the crucible. "No," Raiden said, his voice carrying desperate authority. Lightning lanced down between them, a barrier of divine energy that separated combatants. "Not here. Not now. This ends." "He destroyed my hammer," Shao Kahn snarled, but his voice carried uncertainty. "He must die for that insult." "Your hammer is the least of what will be destroyed if this continues," Raiden countered. He turned to address the entire assembly, gods and sorcerers and warriors alike. "Look around you. The Wuxi Academy, standing for 3,000 years, is in ruins. A god of thunder has been battered, a god of wind has been dismissed, an emperor has been disarmed, and this warrior has barely exerted himself. If we continue this course, we will all die, and Earthrealm will burn in the process." Fujin nodded slowly. "Brother speaks truth. This is beyond any single realm's ability to contain. We must approach the Elder Gods, seek their wisdom and power." "The Elder Gods will want him destroyed," Quan Chi observed, speaking for the first time since his magic had failed. "They do not tolerate threats to their ordained balance. This warrior represents chaos incarnate. They will send the full might of the heavens against him. Then let them," Shang Tsung added. "Perhaps the Elder God's power will succeed where ours has failed." The Slayer lowered the crucible but did not dismiss it. His visor swept across the assembly one final time, and Lao Jin felt the weight of that gaze even from his distant window. The historian wrote, "He judges us and finds us wanting. We speak of balance and order, of realms and tournaments, of laws and boundaries, but he comes from a place where all of that is ash. He is showing us what we are. Beings playing at importance while hell grows beneath our feet." The tear in the sky pulsed, grew wider, and more demons began to emerge. These were different from the Hell Knights, smaller but more numerous, imps that screamed through the air on leathery wings, trailing fire and malice. Dozens of them, perhaps hundreds, blackening the sky with their numbers. They had been drawn by the Slayer's presence, by the argent energy that marked him as Hell's eternal enemy. They descended on the Wuxi Academy like a swarm of locusts made of teeth and flame. The Slayer dismissed the crucible and withdrew his shotgun in a single smooth motion. He began firing, each blast removing multiple imps from existence, but they kept coming. The assembled warriors, despite their differences, understood the threat. Demons did not discriminate between realms or factions. If the imps were not stopped, they would slaughter everything in the academy. Raiden and Fujin moved first, their combined power creating a storm that tore through the demonic swarm. Lightning and wind worked in concert, creating cyclones of electrical death that pulled imps from the sky and incinerated them by the dozen. Liu Kang joined them, his fire adding to the elemental assault, burning trails through the air where demons had been moments before. Shao Kahn, his pride wounded but his warrior instincts intact, picked up a massive piece of rubble and hurled it skyward with strength augmented by soul magic. The projectile transformed into dozens of fragments, each one guided by his will, each one finding an imp and crushing it. Scorpion's spear lanced out repeatedly, yanking demons from the sky to be burned by his hellfire. Sub-Zero created storms of ice, freezing demons mid-flight and shattering them with precise strikes. And the Slayer killed more than all of them combined. He moved through the battlefield like death itself had learned to walk, his weapons speaking a language of annihilation that needed no translation. Every shot was a kill. Every movement positioned him for the next target. His ammunition never seemed to diminish. His energy never flagged. Where the others fought with skill and power, he fought with something beyond either, absolute, mechanical perfection in the art of killing. An imp dove at his head, claws extended, screaming its hatred. He caught it by the throat, crushed its windpipe, and used the corpse as a shield against 3 more demons. When they impacted the body, he dropped it and shot all 3 before they could recover. Another imp tried to attack from behind, but he had already pivoted, his fist catching it mid-flight and driving it into the ground hard enough to crate a stone. A group of 5 demons tried to coordinate, attacking from different angles to overwhelm his defenses. He killed the first with his shotgun, the second with a punch that shattered its skull, the third with a knee that broke its spine, the fourth by grabbing its wing and using it to beat the 5th to death. The entire exchange took less than 3 seconds. Lao Jin watched and wrote, his hand moving almost automatically now, driven by a historian's need to record even as his mind struggled to process what he witnessed. He wrote, "This is not battle. This is extermination. The demons die not because they are weak, but because they are demons, and he is their ending. Every movement is precise. Every kill is purposeful. There is no rage, no fury, no emotion at all, only the work." The swarm began to thin, not through retreat, but through annihilation. The Slayer had carved a hole in their numbers that the others exploited, creating a cascading failure in the demons' assault. Within minutes, the sky was clear again, the ground littered with dissolving corpses, the air thick with sulfur and ozone. Silence returned, broken only by heavy breathing from those who needed to breathe. The Slayer stood at the courtyard's center, his armor covered in gore that evaporated as everyone watched, leaving him pristine once more. He looked up at the tear in the sky, at the wound that still pulsed with argent fire, and those who followed his gaze understood. This was not over. The demons would keep coming as long as that portal remained open. And if the portal stayed open long enough, worse things than imps and hell knights would emerge. "We need to close that tear," Fujin said, voicing what everyone was thinking. "Brother, can you?" "No," Raiden interrupted, his voice heavy with resignation. "That is not a portal created by any magic, I understand. My lightning cannot seal what was not opened by conventional means. We need expertise beyond divine power." "The elder gods," Shao Kahn said, surprising everyone with his agreement. "As much as it galls me to admit, this is beyond any single realm's capability to resolve. We must petition them for intervention." Shang Tsung stepped forward, his expression calculating despite his earlier fear. "There may be another option. The hourglass of time in the Keep of Eternity. If we can access it, if Kronika's power can be harnessed." "Kronika is dead," Liu Kang interrupted flatly. "I killed her myself." "The hourglass is sealed." "Sealed, not destroyed," Shang Tsung countered. "With the proper rituals, with sufficient power, it could be reopened. We could rewrite this entire scenario, erase the warrior from history before he ever arrived." The Slayer's head snapped toward Shang Tsung with such speed and focus that the sorcerer took an involuntary step backward. The visor stared at him, and though no words were spoken, a message was clearly conveyed. "Try. Or perhaps not," Shang Tsung amended quickly. "The hourglass is a delicate thing. Attempting to manipulate it might cause worse problems than we currently face." Quan Chi had been studying the Slayer throughout the battle, his necromancer's senses probing for any weakness, any vulnerability that might be exploited. Now he spoke slowly, carefully, as if piecing together a puzzle. "I sense something about him. Beneath the armor, beneath the weapons, there is a void where soul should reside. Not an absence, but an emptiness, so profound that my power cannot find purchase. It is as if he has been hollowed out and filled with singular purpose." "What purpose?" Liu Kang demanded. Quan Chi's red eyes fixed on the Slayer. "Demons. He exists to kill demons. Not for justice, not for vengeance, not even for duty. It is simply what he is. remove demons from existence, and I suspect he would cease to be. He is not a being with a purpose. He is purpose-given being. The observation hung in the air, and everyone present felt the truth of it. This explained why the Slayer attacked indiscriminately, why reason and diplomacy failed, why divine authority meant nothing to him. He was not choosing to hunt demons. He was demon hunting made manifest, a force as fundamental and unthinking as gravity or time. Then we give him demons, Raiden said slowly, an idea forming. We direct him toward the Netherrealm, let him tear through their forces. It would weaken our enemies and satisfy his purpose. You would unleash him in the Netherrealm. Shao Kahn laughed, but there was uncertainty in it. You would open that door knowing he might not stop with demons? Knowing he might decide that Outworld is tainted enough to warrant cleansing? He has already made that assessment, Fujin observed quietly. Why else would he attack you on sight? Your power reeks of consumed souls, of stolen essence. To him, you are demon-adjacent. The only reason you live is because he was stopped. Shao Kahn's hand clenched, but he did not argue. Everyone had seen how close he had come to death, how the crucible had passed within inches of ending an emperor. A new voice entered the conversation, soft and female, carrying power that made reality ripple. Perhaps I can offer perspective. Cetrion emerged from a portal of pure light, the elder goddess of virtue manifesting in physical form for the first time in centuries. She was radiant, her presence causing the very air to glow, her eyes containing depths that spoke of cosmic awareness. She looked first at the assembled warriors, then at the destroyed academy, and finally at the Slayer. I have been observing this situation from the heavens, Cetrion said, her voice gentle but absolute. The elder gods are concerned. This being, this warrior, does not belong to our reality. He is an intrusion from beyond the realms we know, and his presence threatens to destabilize the balance we have maintained for eons. Then remove him, Shao Kahn demanded. You have the power, goddess. Send him back to whatever hell spawned him. Cetrion's gaze did not leave the Slayer. I do not think you understand what stands before you, Emperor. I do not think any of you do. I can see his essence, what remains of it. He was mortal once, transformed by powers beyond even the elder god's comprehension. He has walked through dimensions we cannot name, fought wars we cannot imagine, killed things that would make our demons look like children's nightmares. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried something that might have been awe or might have been fear. He has killed beings who call themselves gods multiple times. Entire pantheons have fallen before him. Silence greeted this revelation. Then we are doomed, Quan Chi said flatly. If elder goddess power cannot stop him, I did not say I cannot stop him, Cetrion interrupted. I said you do not understand what he is. There is a difference. If I were to engage him with the full might of virtue and creation, one of two things would happen. Either I would destroy him, rending his essence across dimensions and solving this problem permanently, or he would destroy me, adding an elder goddess to his list of divine casualties. I am not certain which outcome would occur, and that uncertainty is terrifying. The Slayer had not moved during this exchange, but his posture suggested attention, interest even. He was learning, cataloging, understanding the hierarchy and power structure of this new reality. Lao Jin recognized the patience in that stillness, the same patience a hunter shows while waiting for prey to reveal itself. What do you propose, goddess? Raiden asked. If combat is uncertain and removal is impossible, what options remain? Cetrion turned to face Raiden fully. I propose we give him what he came for, not demons from our realms, but the source of the tear itself. That wound in the sky is not random. It is a bridge between his dimension and ours, forced open by energies that are anathema to our reality. Somewhere, in one of our realms, is the anchor point, the nexus where his world touches ours. Find that nexus, and I believe he will go there of his own accord. And once there? Fujin asked. Once there, he will either resolve the connection and return to his own dimension, or he will expand the breach and allow his entire war to spill into our reality. Either way, the choice will be his, and our involvement will be at an end. That is madness, Shang Tsung objected. You propose we guide him to a weakness in reality itself? What if he decides to weaponize it? What if he chooses to bring more warriors like himself through? Cetrion's smile was sad and knowing. Sorcerer, there are no more warriors like him. He is unique, singular, irreplaceable, and as for weaponizing the breach, I believe he would prefer to seal it. For all his violence, for all his single-minded purpose, I sense no desire for conquest or expansion in him. He is not building an empire. He is ending a war, one kill at a time, across infinite battlefields. The elder goddess turned back to the slayer, and her expression softened almost imperceptibly. I can see the burden you carry, warrior. I can see the weight of eternity on shoulders that were never meant to bear such weight. You are tired. So very tired. But you cannot stop, can you? The moment you stop, hell wins. The moment you rest, demons spread. You are trapped in a war with no end, and you hate it even as you excel at it. The Slayer's helmet tilted slightly, the first gesture approaching acknowledgement he had made. Come, Cetrion said gently. I will show you the way to what you seek, but first we must travel to the Netherrealm. The anchor point is there, in the deepest pit where Earthrealm and Hell are thinnest. I will guide you, but I cannot fight beside you. That is a battle only you can wage. She turned to the assembled warriors. The rest of you must decide. Will you allow this, or will you force confrontation that will destroy you and achieve nothing? The elder gods have spoken through me. We will not directly engage this warrior unless absolutely necessary. His fight is not with us, and we would be wise to keep it that way. Raiden stepped forward, his expression troubled. Goddess, with respect, you ask us to trust that he will not turn his wrath upon our realms once he has dealt with the Netherrealm. What assurance do we have? None, Cetrion replied simply. But consider this. He has been in Earthrealm for barely an hour. In that time, he has killed demons exclusively. Except when attacked by others, he did not seek out your cities. He did not assault your temples. He destroyed what needed destroying and waited for understanding. That is more restraint than most gods would show in his position. Liu Kang, still cradling his shoulder, spoke quietly. I fought him. I felt his power. If he wanted to kill me, I would be dead. Instead, he wounded me enough to remove me from the fight, but not enough to end me. That was calculation, not accident. The goddess is right. He shows restraint we have not acknowledged. Shao Kahn snarled but did not disagree. He had felt the crucible pass within inches of his chest, had recognized in that moment that his survival was a gift, not a victory. Then, it is decided, Cetrion announced. I will open a pathway to the Netherrealm's deepest reaches. Those who wish to witness this resolution may follow, but do not interfere. This is his purpose, his war, his judgment. We are merely observers to forces we did not summon and cannot control. She raised her hands, and light erupted around her, pure and blinding. When vision returned, a portal stood open, its edges geometric and precise, showing a landscape of fire and shadow and endless suffering. The Netherrealm awaited, and through that portal came the screams of the damned and the roar of demon lords, who did not yet know what was coming. The Slayer walked toward the portal without hesitation. Wait, Raiden called out. The Slayer stopped, turned slightly. Raiden stepped forward, his expression grave. I do not know if you can understand me. I do not know if you care about the realms you pass through or the beings you leave behind. But know this. Earthrealm has survived eons through balance, through the careful maintenance of order between realms. What you do next may shatter that balance forever. I ask you to remember that demons are not the only ones who will suffer from chaos. The Slayer stared at him for a long moment, then turned away and stepped through the portal. Lao Jin watched from his window as the assembly followed, as gods and sorcerers and warriors entered the Netherrealm in the wake of a force they could not stop. He wrote the final entry of this chapter with hands that had seen too much. Today, the balance died. Tomorrow, we learn what grows in its place. The Netherrealm greeted them with heat that was beyond temperature, a sensation of burning that existed on spiritual rather than physical planes. The sky was not sky, but a ceiling of tormented souls, their faces pressed against invisible barriers, screaming warnings or pleas or simple madness. The ground was not ground, but compressed remains of the damned, every step taken on the calcified essence of beings who had failed hell's tests. They emerged on a plateau overlooking an ocean of fire, its waves crashing against shores of bone with sounds like thunder and weeping combined. In the distance, structures rose that were part architecture and part living organism, fortresses grown from the suffering of millions, their walls pulsing with unholy life. The Slayer stood at the plateau's edge, his visor scanning the hellscape with methodical precision. He was cataloguing, assessing, planning. This was familiar territory to him, Lao Jin realized with dawning horror. Not this specific hell, but hell in general. He had walked through places like this so many times that the horror no longer registered. It was simply the terrain where his work happened. Cetrion floated beside him, her divine radiance standing in sharp contrast to the surrounding corruption. "The Nexus is there," she said, pointing toward a massive structure at the fire ocean's far side. It was a tower, impossibly tall, its peak disappearing into the soul ceiling, its base anchored in flames that burned without consuming. That is the Spire of Souls, Quan Chi's greatest architectural triumph. Within it is a gate that connects to dimensional weaknesses across all realms. If your world touches ours anywhere, it will be there. The Slayer's only response was to begin walking down the plateau, toward the fire ocean and the horrors beyond. He does not wait, Shao Kahn observed, does not plan, does not scout, does not prepare, he simply acts. "He has been doing this longer than your empire has existed," Cetrion replied. "Planning is for those who doubt. He does not doubt." They followed at a distance, a procession of power moving through hell like a divine embassy. Demons noticed their passage, lesser creatures that scattered before Cetrion's light or cowered before Shao Kahn's presence. But as they descended toward the fire ocean, the demons grew bolder, larger, more organized. These were the Netherrealm's true residents, beings that had been here since before the realms separated, that had never known anything but suffering and inflicting suffering. A Malebolg emerged from the flames, its body composed of hundreds of lesser demons fused together into a massive, writhing mass of teeth and claws and hatred. It was the size of a building, its roar shaking the air hard enough to crack the calcified ground. It charged the Slayer with speed that should have been impossible for something so massive. The Slayer did not break stride. He reached into his arsenal and withdrew a weapon that pulsed with contained fury, a rocket launcher that looked like it had been pulled from nightmares and reverse-engineered for maximum lethality. The first rocket caught the Malebolg in what might have been a face, detonating with force that transformed the front third of its mass into flying debris. The demon staggered, but did not fall, its body already regenerating, lesser demons pulling themselves together to reform the whole. The Slayer fired again and again, walking forward between shots, never stopping, never slowing. Each explosion removed chunks of the demon, but its regeneration kept pace. It was designed to be unkillable, to overwhelm through attrition and immortality. The Slayer switched weapons mid-stride, holstering the rocket launcher and drawing something that looked like it belonged in a forge rather than a battlefield. The BFG 9000 charged with a whine that built into a scream, green energy coalescing at its barrel, reality bending around the weapon as it prepared to unleash annihilation. He fired. The blast was not an explosion but an erasure, a sphere of argent energy that unmade matter at the molecular level. It hit the Malebolge center mass and expanded, consuming the demon from within, dissolving bonds that held its component parts together. The creature had time to realize what was happening, time to feel its immortality stripped away, time to scream once before ceasing to exist. The sphere continued expanding, catching smaller demons in its radius, erasing them from reality with impartial efficiency. When it finally dissipated, the path to the fire ocean was clear, the ground glassed smooth, the air smelling of ozone and potential. The Slayer reloaded and kept walking. "I have never seen Malebolge destroyed so efficiently," Quan Chi said, his voice carrying professional admiration despite his circumstances. They are designed to be war engines, to regenerate from any damage. He did not wound it or bind it, he simply removed its existence as a concept. The BFG, Cetrion said softly. A weapon that weaponizes reality against itself. It is why demons fear him. He does not fight on their terms. He rewrites the terms until victory is inevitable. They reached the Fire Ocean's shore, where waves of literal flame crashed against bone sand with rhythmic violence. The Slayer examined the expanse, calculating distance and trajectory. Then he dove in. The fire swallowed him instantly, his form disappearing beneath waves that would have incinerated gods. For a moment, the assembled watchers could only stare in disbelief. Then the ocean began to boil, not from heat, which was already infinite, but from violence happening beneath its surface. Demons that made the Fire Ocean their home were dying, their deaths sending ripples across the burning expanse. The Slayer emerged on the far shore, his armor glowing white-hot but intact. He had swum through an ocean of fire, fighting demons the entire way, and emerged barely inconvenienced. Behind him, the ocean churned with dying creatures, their death throes creating whirlpools of flame. "We must fly," Fujin said, creating winds that lifted himself and the others across the expanse. They followed the Slayer's path, careful to avoid the thrashing demons below, and landed on the far shore to find him already advancing on the Spire of Souls. The spire's base was guarded by an army. Not dozens or hundreds, but thousands of demons arrayed in ranks that stretched to the horizon. Hell Knights and imps, Malabolges and barons, creatures whose names were lost to time and whose forms defied description. They had been assembled in response to the intrusion, organized by some intelligence that recognized the Slayer as an extinction-level threat. At their head stood a being that made even Cetrion pause in recognition. A Titan, one of Hell's oldest and most powerful servants, towered above its lesser brethren like a mountain made of malice. It was ancient enough to remember when the realms were young, powerful enough that single Titans had destroyed civilizations. Its roar shook the Netherrealm itself, a challenge that carried across dimensions. The Slayer stopped, assessed the army arrayed against him, and made a decision. He drew the crucible once more, its argent fire illuminating the hellscape, and charged directly into the army's center. What followed was not a battle, but a revelation of what one being could accomplish when purpose and power aligned perfectly. The first rank of demons died without understanding what killed them, the crucible passing through their forms and leaving nothing but disintegrating matter. The Slayer carved a wedge into the army's formation, his blade never stopping, never slowing, each swing precisely calculated to maximize casualties. Demons pressed in from all sides, overwhelming numbers trying to bury him through sheer mass, but he moved through them like a shark through water. The crucible found a Hell Knight's throat, removed its head, continued to bisect the imp behind it, reversed to block a baron's strike, then drove forward through the baron's chest. The Slayer's offhand fired his shotgun point blank into surrounding demons, each blast clearing space that he immediately filled with more death. He fought with his entire body, elbows and knees and headbutts augmenting the crucible's lethality. A Malabolga attempted to engulf him, its mass of bodies trying to swallow the Slayer whole. He activated something in his armor, and suddenly he was moving faster, his form blurring with speed that exceeded even divine reflexes. He cut his way out of the Malabolg from within, emerging from its back in a spray of gore, already turning to face new threats. The army's coordination began to break down as casualties mounted beyond sustainable levels. Demons were social creatures despite their nature. They functioned through hierarchies and intimidation. But the Slayer represented something outside that hierarchy, something that could not be intimidated or reasoned with. Panic spread through the ranks, individual demons breaking formation to flee or attack independently. Both choices proved equally fatal. The Slayer pursued fleeing demons with single-minded efficiency, killing them even as he engaged those still fighting. His situational awareness was absolute. He seemed to know where every enemy was at all times, prioritizing threats with computer-like precision. A baron tried to flank him, but he had already pivoted, the crucible removing its arm before a second swing removed everything from the waist up. The Titan finally entered the fray, its massive form crushing lesser demons beneath its feet as it charged toward the Slayer. Its fist, the size of a boulder, descended with force that should have flattened the armored warrior into paste. The Slayer met the fist with the crucible, and the argent blade cut through flesh that had withstood the Elder God's judgment. The Titan roared, pulling back a hand that was now missing 3 fingers, staring in disbelief at wounds that actually bled. The Slayer used the moment to leap, his jump augmented by armor systems, carrying him to the Titan's chest height. The crucible stabbed forward, punching through armor-like hide, seeking the demon's core. The Titan tried to swat him away, but the Slayer held on with one hand while driving the crucible deeper with the other. The blade found what it sought, a concentration of demonic essence that served as the creature's heart. Argent fire erupted from the wound, spreading through the Titan's body like veins of light, consuming it from within. The Slayer rode the Titan down as it fell, maintaining his grip on the crucible, using the demon's collapse to kill more enemies beneath its falling mass. When the Titan hit the ground, the impact was cataclysmic, creating shockwaves that knocked nearby demons off their feet. The Slayer withdrew the crucible, watched the Titan's body begin to dissolve, and turned back to the remaining army. They broke. Thousands of demons, many of whom had existed for eons, made the collective decision that survival meant retreat. They scattered in all directions, abandoning formation, abandoning strategy, abandoning any pretense of being Hell's vanguard. The Slayer let them go, his purpose served. The path to the Spire of Souls was clear. The assembled watchers, who had observed the entire battle from a safe distance, processed what they had witnessed in silence. Shao Kahn, who had conquered realms through military might, recognized mastery when he saw it. Liu Kang, champion of Mortal Kombat, understood that he was watching a level of martial skill beyond anything the tournaments had produced. Raiden and Fujin, gods of thunder and wind, felt humility at witnessing power that made their divine status seem almost quaint. Only Cetrion seemed unsurprised. He has done this before. Not here, not against these specific demons, but he has stormed hell itself more times than can be counted. This is not exceptional for him. This is Tuesday. The Slayer reached the Spire of Souls base and stopped, looking up at the structure that climbed toward infinity. Lao Jin, who had been recording the battle through Raiden's magic from a safe distance, focused his chronicle on what happened next. The Slayer placed his hand against the spire's wall, and the entire structure shuddered. Symbols appeared where his hand touched, glowing with argent fire. Ancient characters that predated the realm's separation. They spread outward from his touch like ripples on water, covering the spire's surface, rewriting its purpose. Quan Chi gasped, recognizing the magic being used. He is sanctifying it, the necromancer breathed. He is purifying the entire structure, burning away every trace of netherrealm corruption. That is not sorcery. That is divine wrath made physical. The spire screamed, a sound that came not from stone but from the millions of souls that had been used in its construction. They were being freed, released from torment, allowed to dissolve into whatever lay beyond even the netherrealm. The spire was collapsing, not physically but metaphysically, its very essence being unmade. And from within that collapsing structure, something awakened. A voice emerged, massive and ancient, carrying power that made even the Elder God's presence seem diminished. Who dares desecrate my work? Quan Chi's face went pale. Shinnok, the fallen Elder God, is still bound within the spire. I thought him dormant, but the Slayer's intrusion has awakened him. The spire's top exploded outward, and a figure rose from the ruins, ascending on wings of bone and shadow. Shinnok, fallen Elder God of Death, had been imprisoned within his own creation after his last defeat, bound by chains forged from Liu Kang's victory in the battle for Kronika's power. But those chains were weakening now, corroded by argent fire that recognized no authority save its own. Shinnok descended to stand before the Slayer, his form towering and terrible, radiating power that had once threatened all of creation. His skull-like face burned with green fire, his armor composed of harvested souls who still screamed and writhed. He raised a hand, and necromantic energy gathered, death itself coalescing into tangible form. "You are the insect that has caused such disturbance," Shinnok said, his voice carrying the weight of eons. "Do you understand what you face? I am an elder god, fallen but not diminished. I have existed since before mortality was conceived. I have fought the One Being itself. What are you before such power?" The Slayer responded by shooting him in the face. The shotgun blast would have vaporized a lesser being, but Shinnok was no lesser being. His head snapped back from the impact, more from surprise than damage, and his expression shifted from arrogance to fury. "You dare?" Shinnok's hand swept forward, and a wave of necromantic energy rolled out, death incarnate seeking to drain life from everything it touched. Plants withered, stone aged 1,000,000 years in seconds. The air itself seemed to die. The wave hit the Slayer, passed through him, and continued onward without effect. Shinnok's eyes widened. "Impossible. You are mortal. You must have life force to drain. How are you immune to death itself?" The Slayer holstered his shotgun and drew the crucible, answering the question with action rather than words. He advanced on the fallen elder god, his pace steady and unhurried, and Shinnok found himself stepping backward before conscious thought could intervene. Some primal part of his being, older than his divine status, recognized what was coming. "I see," Shinnok said slowly, his tone shifting from fury to understanding. "You are not immune to death. You are death. Or rather, you are the opposite of death, which amounts to the same thing. You are the undying, the eternal, the unending. You cannot be killed because you have already given up everything that makes death possible. You are a weapon that walks, nothing more." The Slayer's response was to swing the crucible in an arc that blazed with argent fire. Shinnok conjured a shield of solidified death, power that had defended against the combined might of Earthrealm's champions. The crucible cut through it like it was made of paper, forcing Shinnok to teleport away, reappearing a dozen yards distant. "Then let us see if a weapon can withstand the full power of a god," Shinnok snarled. He raised both hands, and the Netherrealm itself responded. The ground erupted with skeletal warriors, thousands of them, an army of the dead animated by divine necromancy. The sky opened, and demons poured through, called by their master's rage. The fire ocean rose in a tsunami of flame, a wall of destruction aimed directly at the Slayer. The Slayer stood his ground. Raiden and the others watched from the spire's ruins as the battle escalated beyond anything they had prepared for. "We should help him," Fujin said, winds already gathering around his form. "No," Cetrion said firmly. "This is not our fight. Interfering now would only complicate matters. Watch and learn what true power looks like when unleashed without restraint." The tsunami of fire crashed down on the Slayer's position with force that would have obliterated cities. When it receded, the Slayer was still standing, his armor glowing from absorbed heat, the crucible burning brighter than ever. The skeleton army reached him moments later, a tide of animated bone that sought to overwhelm through numbers. The Slayer moved through them like a scythe through wheat, the crucible's argent fire not just destroying but purifying, burning away the necromantic energy that gave them false life. Bones clattered to the ground as empty husks, released from Shinnok's control, finally allowed to rest. The demons that followed fared no better, their physical forms offering no more resistance than the skeletons had. Shinnok watched his armies die, watched his power prove insufficient, and felt something he had not experienced in millennia: doubt. "What are you?" he demanded, no longer commanding but genuinely questioning. "I have faced the elder gods at their peak. I have battled the One Being's consciousness. None of them fought like this. None of them were this relentless." The Slayer dismissed the crucible and withdrew the BFG 9000, the weapon charging with its distinctive whine. Shinnok's eyes went wide with recognition and horror. "No, that is not possible. That weapon should not exist in this reality. It violates every law of our dimensional structure." The Slayer fired. The Argent Sphere launched toward Shinnok, expanding as it traveled, consuming everything in its path. The fallen Elder God tried to teleport, but the sphere anticipated his destination, bending space-time to intercept. It caught him mid-materialization, the argent energy wrapping around his divine form, beginning the process of unmaking. Shinnok screamed, a sound that echoed across the netherrealm and beyond, into realms where gods listened and trembled. He was not dying. Death was too simple for what was happening. He was being erased, his existence written out of reality one layer at a time. The argent energy burned through his divine essence, found the core of what made him an elder god, and began consuming that too. No, Shinnok gasped, his form flickering between existence and non-existence. This cannot be. Elder gods are eternal. We cannot be destroyed, only diminished. It is fundamental law. The Slayer walked forward, stepped into the sphere of argent energy with no visible effect, and grabbed Shinnok by the throat. The fallen elder god stared into that green visor and saw reflected there every moment of suffering he had caused, every soul he had tortured, every realm he had threatened. The Slayer was not just killing him, he was judging him and finding him wanting. Shinnok tried to speak, to plead or threaten or bargain, but the Slayer's grip tightened, silencing him. The argent energy intensified, the BFG sphere collapsing inward, concentrating all of its erasing power into the space where Shinnok existed. There was a moment of absolute brilliance, light beyond light, and then silence. When vision returned, Shinnok was gone. Not destroyed, not diminished, but erased so completely that even memory of his existence seemed to waver. The Slayer stood alone in a crater of glassed earth, his armor smoking, the BFG in his other hand still radiating heat. The assembled watchers stood in absolute silence, processing what they had just witnessed. An elder god, fallen or not, had been removed from existence by a single warrior. The implications were staggering, reality-breaking, terrifying beyond measure. He killed an elder god, Liu Kang said, his voice barely above a whisper. That should not be possible. The elder gods exist outside the cycle of life and death. They are fundamental forces of reality. Were, Cetrion corrected, her own voice shaking slightly. Shinnok was, past tense. The warrior did not kill him in any traditional sense. He erased him, removed him from the equation of existence. That argent energy he wields, it is not of our reality. It follows different rules, operates under different laws. In his dimension, even gods can die. Raiden stepped forward, his mind racing through implications and consequences. Goddess, what happens now? With Shinnok gone, truly gone, the balance of power between elder gods is disrupted. The realms could destabilize. They will adapt, Cetrion said, though she sounded uncertain. Reality is more resilient than we give it credit for. But you are right that this changes everything. The elder gods are no longer absolute. We can be ended. That knowledge will reshape divine policy for eons to come. The Slayer was already moving again, walking toward the ruins of the spire, ignoring the gods and sorcerers who watched him with newfound terror. He searched through the rubble with purpose, looking for something specific. Finally, he found it. A gateway embedded in the spire's foundation, still intact despite the structure's collapse. The gateway pulsed with the same argent fire as the tear in Earthrealm's sky, confirming Cetrion's assessment. This was the nexus, the point where the Slayer's dimension touched their reality. He approached it, placed his hand against its surface, and the gateway flared to life, showing through its frame a landscape that made the Netherrealm look like paradise. On the other side was hell, but not their hell. This was the hell that had forged the Slayer, a place of infinite suffering and eternal war, where demons numbered in the trillions and fought not for territory, but for the right to inflict pain. The landscape was composed entirely of corpses and the weapons that had created them, a monument to violence that stretched to horizons that might not actually exist. And standing in that hell, visible through the gateway, were more demons than could be counted, an army that dwarfed anything the realms had produced. They were waiting, gathered at the threshold, ready to pour through the moment the gateway stabilized. The Slayer stood before that army, alone, and did not hesitate. He stepped through the gateway, crossing from one dimension to another, and the demons surged forward to meet him. The last thing the Watchers saw before the gateway began to collapse was the Slayer drawing his weapons, his armor flaring with argent fire, preparing to wage war against infinity itself. The gateway sealed with a sound like reality sighing in relief, and the tear in Earthrealm's sky began to close. The Nexus was resolving, the dimensional breach healing now that the Slayer had returned to his own hell. Within minutes, the wound was gone, leaving behind only scorched sky and the memory of wrongness. The Wuxi Academy was ruins when they returned, transported by Cetrian's power back to Earthrealm. The destruction would take years to repair, the scars both physical and spiritual, but the realm was intact, the balance maintained despite being tested in ways it was never designed to withstand. Lao Jin emerged from the library, his chronicle completed, his hands stained with ink, and his mind marked by visions he would never forget. He approached Raiden and the others, his expression grave. "I have recorded everything," the historian said quietly. "The battles, the revelations, the death of an elder god. Future generations will read these words and struggle to believe them. But I must ask, Lord Raiden, what have we learned? What truth has been revealed that we can carry forward?" Raiden was silent for a long moment, his eyes distant, processing truths that shook his divine certainty. Finally, he spoke, his voice heavy with the weight of new understanding. "We have learned that our reality is not unique, that beyond the realms we know are dimensions we cannot imagine, where power operates under different rules and gods are not eternal. We have learned that the balance we have fought to maintain for eons is not universal law but local custom, and that beings exist who care nothing for our traditions." He paused, his gaze moving to the sky where the wound had been. "We have learned that evil comes in forms beyond our comprehension, but so does the response to that evil. The Slayer is not good in any sense we understand. He does not fight for justice or mercy or peace. He fights because fighting is his nature, his purpose, his existence. And yet, he saved us, not intentionally perhaps, but by pursuing his purpose, he removed a threat we could not have defeated. And most importantly," Fujin added, his own voice subdued, "we have learned humility. We gods have grown comfortable in our power, confident in our supremacy. Today, we saw a mortal, or what was once mortal, who could kill us with the same ease we might kill demons. That knowledge will reshape how we approach our duties." Shao Kahn, surprisingly, was the one who laughed, though the sound carried no humor. "You speak of lessons and humility, but I heard a different message. Power is not absolute, empires are not eternal. Conquest is meaningless if something exists that can erase even gods. Perhaps it is time for Outworld to reconsider its strategies." Shang Tsung and Quan Chi exchanged glances, their calculating minds already working through implications and opportunities. "The elder gods are no longer untouchable," Shang Tsung said softly. "That changes everything. Do not mistake this for an opportunity," Cetrion warned, her divine presence reasserting itself now that the immediate threat had passed. "The Slayer spared you because you were irrelevant to his purpose. Push against the elder gods, attempt to exploit this moment, and you will discover that while we may be killable, we are far from helpless." Shinnok fell because he fought alone against something he did not understand. United, the elder gods remain the supreme power in these realms. But even as she spoke, everyone present heard the uncertainty in her voice, the doubt that had not existed before. The Slayer had not just killed a god, he had killed the concept of divine invulnerability. That genie could not be put back in its bottle. Liu Kang, still holding his shoulder where the argent wound had finally stopped smoking, approached Lao Jin. "What will you write as the conclusion to this chronicle? How does this story end?" Lao Jin looked at the young champion, at the god who had been humbled, at the sorcerers who plotted, at the goddess who doubted. He thought about the Slayer, somewhere beyond their reality, still fighting, still killing, still existing as purpose without peace. "I will write the truth," Lao Jin said finally. "That mortal combat, with all its traditions and tournaments, with all its careful balance and ancient laws, was designed to maintain order between realms. But the Slayer showed us that our order is fragile, our balance illusory. He came not to participate in our system but to reveal its inadequacy. The historian opened his chronicle to the final page and began to write, speaking the words aloud as his brush moved. The Doomslayer came to our reality, not as conqueror or savior, but as mirror. In his actions, we saw reflected our own weaknesses, our own failures, our own small scale. He fought an army of demons with the same effort we might swat a fly. He killed an elder god as casually as we might extinguish a candle. And through it all, he showed no pride, no satisfaction, no emotion whatsoever. He is not a being to be admired or feared or respected. He is a warning, a demonstration of what exists beyond our comfortable reality. In a cosmos of infinite dimensions, we are not special. Our gods are not supreme. Our battles are not significant. We are simply one more realm struggling against darkness, and the Slayer is a reminder that darkness takes forms we have never imagined. Mortal Kombat was created to balance worlds, to prevent any single realm from dominating others. But the Slayer does not seek balance. He seeks extinction, the complete and utter annihilation of everything that serves hell. In his dimension, there is no tournament to determine fate, no rules to govern conflict, no mercy for the corrupted. There is only the war, eternal and absolute. He came to our reality by accident, a dimensional tear that should not have occurred. He stayed long enough to kill what needed killing, then returned to his own hell without a word spoken or a thought given to the realms he left behind. And that, perhaps, is the most terrifying truth of all. We were not important enough to destroy, not significant enough to save, not interesting enough to acknowledge. The Doomslayer does not care about Mortal Kombat. He does not care about the elder gods or the balance between realms or the fate of civilizations. He cares only about demons, and to him, we are simply obstacles between his weapon and his purpose. Today, we were fortunate that our demons aligned with his targets. Tomorrow, if hell's corruption spreads too far into Earthrealm or Outworld, he might return. And if he does, he will not distinguish between possessed and innocent, between corrupted and pure. He will simply clean the infection, regardless of cost. This is the lesson we must carry forward. The realms are more fragile than we believed. The gods are more mortal than they claimed. The balance is more tenuous than the elder gods maintained. And somewhere, in a dimension we cannot reach and should never seek, a war continues that makes our conflicts look like children playing at combat. The Doomslayer came to Mortal Kombat, fought for less than a day, and forever changed our understanding of reality. That is his legacy. That is his warning. That is his judgment upon us all. Lao Jin set down his brush and looked at his assembled audience. That is how this chronicle ends. Not with victory or defeat, but with understanding. We are small, and the cosmos is vast, and we should be grateful that the worst things in it have larger concerns than our petty realm disputes. Silence greeted his words, the kind of silence that follows profound truth. Then, slowly, the assembly began to disperse. Raiden and Fujin returned to the Sky Temple to consult with the elder gods about this new reality they faced. Shao Kahn opened a portal back to Outworld, his pride wounded, but his strategic mind already adapting to a universe where his power was no longer absolute. Shang Tsung and Quan Chi slipped away with the particular quietness of sorcerers who had witnessed something they needed time to process and exploit. Liu Kang remained, staring at the spot where the dimensional tear had been, his expression thoughtful. "Master Lao Jin," he said quietly, "do you think he will return? The Slayer, I mean. Could he come back?" Lao Jin considered the question carefully before answering. "I do not know. But I believe that if demons ever truly gain a foothold in our realms, if hell begins to spread beyond the Netherrealm, if corruption becomes so pervasive that it threatens the dimensional barriers, then yes, he will return. Not because he cares about us, but because hell existing anywhere is an affront to his purpose. Then perhaps we should be more vigilant," Liu Kang said. "Perhaps Mortal Kombat, for all its flaws, serves a purpose greater than we realized. It keeps Outworld from overwhelming Earthrealm, yes, but more importantly, it prevents any single realm from becoming so corrupted that it attracts outside attention." "A wise observation," Lao Jin agreed. "The tournament is not just about balance between our realms, It is about maintaining a level of order that keeps us beneath the notice of forces like the Slayer. In that sense, every Mortal Kombat is not just defending Earthrealm from Outworld, but defending all realms from the cosmos itself. Liu Kang nodded slowly, his champion's mind already thinking ahead to future tournaments, future threats, future challenges. But now, thanks to the Slayer's brief visit, he understood the stakes in a way he never had before. The battles he fought were not just personal or political, they were existential, holding back chaos that came in forms beyond demon or sorcerer. Cetrion had remained as well, her divine presence subdued but watchful. Now she spoke, addressing both Liu Kang and Lao Jin with equal gravity. The Elder Gods will want this incident minimized, perhaps even erased from history. They will argue that knowledge of their vulnerability could destabilize the realms, encourage rebellion, inspire foolish attempts to challenge divine authority. "Will you erase our memories?" Liu Kang asked, his tone challenging despite his respect for the goddess. "No," Cetrion said, surprising them both. "I will not. The other Elder Gods may disagree with my choice, but I believe you deserve to remember what happened here. Ignorance is not protection. You fought well today, showed wisdom in recognizing when combat was futile, and demonstrated growth in accepting truths that contradicted your worldview. That deserves to be remembered, not forgotten." She turned to Lao Jin specifically. "And your chronicle, historian, will stand as written. I will ensure it is protected from divine censorship. Future generations should know what transpired, should understand that their reality is part of a larger cosmos. Let them learn humility from our example, rather than having to face it themselves unprepared." "Thank you, goddess," Lao Jin said, bowing deeply. "I will maintain this record faithfully and pass it to future historians so that the lesson is never lost." Cetrion nodded, then hesitated, as if weighing whether to share something more. Finally, she spoke again, her voice softer, almost vulnerable. "When I touched the Slayer's essence, before he departed, I felt something unexpected. Beneath the purpose, beneath the rage and the endless drive to kill demons, there was something else, something that might have been human once." "What do you mean?" Liu Kang asked. "I felt sorrow," Cetrion said quietly. "Ancient, profound, bottomless sorrow. He is not fighting because he wants to, but because he must. He is trapped in his purpose, locked into an eternal war that he cannot escape even if he wanted to. Every demon he kills brings no satisfaction, no closure, no peace. It simply clears space for the next demon, and the next, and the next, forever." She looked up at the sky where the wound had been. "He is more tragic than any cursed warrior I have ever encountered. At least those touched by traditional curses can hope for release, can strive for redemption, can dream of ending their torment. But the Slayer has no such hope. His curse is not external but internal. He has become the thing he does, remove demons from existence, and he would cease to be. His only purpose is also his only prison." The three of them stood in silence, contemplating the horror of an existence spent in eternal combat with no possibility of victory, only endless repetition. It was perhaps the truest hell imaginable. Not torment inflicted from outside, but purpose become prison. That is why he showed restraint, Liu Kang realized. Not because he feared us or respected our authority, but because adding to the suffering in the cosmos, even among beings who are not his targets, would be pointless cruelty. He is trapped in violence, but he is not violent by nature. He is a weapon that wishes it were not. "Perhaps," Cetrion agreed. "Or perhaps I am projecting mortal emotion onto something that has transcended such concepts. Either way, he is gone now, returned to his own hell, and we are left with the aftermath of his passage. Use this time wisely, champions. Rebuild what was destroyed, both physically and philosophically. And remember that the next time demons threaten our realms, we face them not just as enemies to our people, but as harbingers of forces beyond our comprehension." The elder goddess began to fade, her divine form dissolving into light that scattered on winds that existed between dimensions. Her final words hung in the air like a blessing and a warning combined. "May you never need the Slayer's intervention again, for his help comes at a price higher than most can imagine paying." Then she was gone, and Liu Kang and Lao Jin were left alone in the ruins of the Wuxi Academy. Around them, monks began to emerge from hiding places, surveying the damage, beginning the long process of recovery and reconstruction. Masters called for students, healers tended to the wounded, and slowly, life began to return to normal. But normal had changed. Every person who had witnessed the Slayer's passage carried that memory like a brand, a reminder that their reality was not as solid as they had believed, their gods not as supreme, their battles not as significant. The balance they had fought to maintain was revealed as a choice rather than a law, a preference rather than a necessity. Lao Jin walked among the ruins, his chronicle clutched carefully to his chest, and thought about the future. Generations would read his words and perhaps learn from them. Perhaps they would understand that strength was not the same as power, that violence was not the same as war, that purpose was not the same as meaning. The Doomslayer had come to mortal combat, fought for a single day, and left behind lessons that would reshape reality itself, not through conquest or teaching or even deliberate example, but simply by existing, by being what he was, by demonstrating truths that could not be denied or forgotten. As twilight fell over the academy, Lao Jin climbed to the highest intact tower and looked out across Earthrealm. The realm was at peace, more or less, the immediate threat past, but somewhere, in a dimension beyond reach, the Slayer continued his war, forever killing, forever fighting, forever trapped in purpose that was both his salvation and his damnation. And if hell ever grew too strong, if demons ever threatened to overwhelm the realms completely, that warrior would return, not as savior, but as solution, not to rescue them, but to cleanse them. Not because he cared about their fate, but because demons existing anywhere was an offense against his very being. Lao Jin opened his chronicle one final time and added a single sentence at the very end, below his signature and seal. "We pray we never see him again, for his return would mean we have failed so completely that only extinction can restore balance." He closed the book, sealed it with wax and magic that would preserve it for centuries, and descended from the tower. Behind him, the sky was clear and dark, the stars shining with their usual indifference. The realms continued their eternal dance of conflict and cooperation, ignorant of how close they had come to annihilation. Mortal combat would continue, tournament following tournament, realm fighting realm, all according to ancient tradition and carefully maintained rules. But now, at least some of them would understand that their conflicts existed within a larger context, that their battles were meaningful only because forces greater than themselves allowed them to be. The Doomslayer had been their uninvited guest for less than a day, their unexpected champion against threats they could not defeat, their mirror reflecting uncomfortable truths about their own limitations. He had come without warning, fought without mercy, and departed without thanks or explanation. And in doing so, he had taught them more about the nature of reality, power, and purpose than centuries of tournament combat and divine revelation combined. Not through words or wisdom, but through simple, brutal demonstration of what existence looked like when reduced to its most fundamental element, the war between order and chaos, fought by beings who had given up everything else to be weapons in that eternal conflict. The Wuxi Academy would be rebuilt. The realms would continue their dance. The gods would adapt to their newfound mortality. The tournaments would resume. Life, in all its complicated glory, would go on. But they would never forget the warrior who had come from hell to show them what hell truly meant and what was required to stand against it.